got it.
So did I miss you do that?
It is automatic.
Thank you. You leave it open.
Okay, call the meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag, of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice for all. Okay, consent agenda. Recommended action is approve the following items which are included in the consent agenda. Those include 5A, the meeting minutes, 7A, Board of Education calendar and budget calendar reapproval, 7B, the creation of extracurricular activity account, 7C, resolution for the disposal of personal property, 7D, donation acceptance, 7E, athletic mergers, and 7F, the special education packet. May I have a motion to accept this consent agenda?
So
Yes.
moved.
Martha first and Colleen second. We voting, Karen, online?
Yeah. Give me 1 second.
Okay,
Okay.
I'll reboot back into. There we go.
Seven, yes.
Okay, 7 yes, 0 no. Motion passes. Good of the cause. Do we have anybody there or any emails?
Nobody is here. And
Well, we chop liver.
wait, would you like to say something? No, there's no emails.
Okay, thank you. Moving right along, budget performance report, Dana.
Okay, for the month of December, you'll see that we brought in about $240,000. That's favorable by 64,000. Expenditures, on the other hand, a little over 2 million, and that's considered unfavorable by about $500,000. So we had $500,000 more go out this December than last December. But as I've said each time, is everything is about a snapshot in terms of when things get processed. We'll even see that next in the Treasury report. Overall, we are trending slightly under where we were last year in terms of revenue to dates, a little over 90% from last year to about 83%, a difference of about $1 million. But as I look today, we're really only off by a couple $100,000 from our revenue from last year to this year. Expenditures, same thing. We've actually a little under from last year, 47% to about 38%. That is under plan, favorable by $1.8 million. But again, when I look today in terms of the real time, we're really there's only a couple $100,000 difference from last year, slightly over last year. As it looks right now, projection wise, we're still projecting to the good. We're still projecting a difference of about $800,000. But I do not believe that will be the case by the time we get to the end of the school year. I do not see us having that kind of difference that we had last year. If you remember, we had a little over $900,000, and the year before was about $1.3 million. So we're going to be trending back to kind of pre-COVID when it comes to as projection, where there's probably going to be about a couple $100,000 difference. If that, one of the things that we're going to try to do is keep an eye on this, and if there's any things that are on our list that we can purchase, we will throughout the year, as opposed to waiting until the very end. So as it looks right now, we are still positively trending well in terms of our revenue coming in and our expenditures. Yes, Martha.
Thank you for this as always. So just for my understanding, up to total month-to-date expenditures, we should not be concerned that there's a 25% of the, well, that's not quite right, but you know what I mean, $250,000 versus $500,000 versus 2 million unfavorable. We should not be concerned by that?
No, because that is really just looking at the month of December. So the first part of this report looks just at what we did for each month. So in this case, when you look at December for expenditures, we had a little more expenditures, about $500,000 this year than last year. And one of the biggest reasons, that's really what that is saying is a good portion of that is we, for the most part, are operating a normal year when it comes to expenditures. If not, we're probably spending a little more than we have in a pre-COVID. So that's where it's tricky when you compare this year to last year and what we did last year to the year before up to a certain point. Once we get to a certain point because of COVID, we still had a lot of restrictions last year. We didn't have field trips. We weren't doing a lot of things. Sports trips were curtailed, things like that. So we weren't doing a lot. Last year at this time, we were still anticipating seeing a potential 20% cut in our state aid. So we were really cutting back on allowing for normal expenditures, professional development, things like that. So that's why when you look at this year, we're really we're operating a normal year for the most part. We haven't been really impacted expense-wise for COVID. We had our normal field trips. We had our normal sports runs in the fall time. So far this winter for winter sports, we haven't had to change too many things. We've changed a couple events only because we were lacking drivers, but we're not canceling the events. We're just switching them. So we're operating, what I would say is under a normal pre-COVID year in terms of expenses.
So this is just compared to last year?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you reorder this report so that the month goes below the fiscal year? Because it's so granular, it raises red flags that may not need to be raised.
Well, that's where you look at it. We have the month. So the first part of it is just looking at the month. And then the second part is year to date. And that's really where the focus is. We can't really focus on the month expenditures and revenue. It's really looking at the whole picture.
Exactly.
Remember,
so can you reorder the report? Or
what do you mean by reorder the report?
Move the month of December fiscal year 22 below the fiscal year to date, July to December, so that that's not the first thing you see.
I would have to look into it, but it's kind of a template. So I don't know if it necessarily will switch because they're looking at it. If you look at it, it's here's the month, and then here's the year. So it's just showing a snapshot for the month, but then here's the big picture for year to year stuff.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Any other questions, comments?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Dana.
Great. Treasurer's report, you want to?
Sure. Things continue to look good. We still have a fair amount of money in our cash sweep, a little over $18 million. When I looked at it not too long ago, late last week, I think we were down from the 18 million because what happens is just about every payroll, we move money. We don't keep a lot, and you'll see that we don't keep a lot in our operating funds for that reason. The cash sweep is where we're going to gain interest. So we keep as much there, and basically every payroll or every time we have a warrant where we pay our bills, we transfer money out of the cash sweep into our operating accounts. So we move it just before to pay our bills, and then we leave the rest in there. So it's a good place to be that, but it's always changing. It's happening basically every 2 weeks. You see fluctuations. We're at that point now where we're not going to see money added to the sweep. You'll see that number come down because we're pulling from it every payroll or every time. We try to do a warrants where we're paying our bills every 2 weeks. We try to plus payroll. But you'll see one of the smallest outstanding checklists that I've seen in a long time. We only had about $34,000 outstanding. Great. And the main reason there is we didn't have any large BOCES checks going out. They actually just went out last week. So my guess is our January one reconciliation will be a little different. But right now it looks good in terms of that. Not a lot of outstanding checks. But again, this was produced just before we made our, I think we make 3 payments to BOCES each month between health benefits and dental and workman's comp, and as well as then a big payment for the Ed Center and the services there. But we are still looking pretty good. Lots of cash in the accounts.
Sorry, what is a warrant?
A warrant is when we cut checks. So basically, when Lori Bombach is our accounts payable person, and when she gets enough payables together, we do a warrant. So basically, I will produce anywhere from 50. I've had up as high as 115 checks go out at one time, where we're paying our bills from Amazon to NBT to BOCES, everything, our annual thing. Each month we make, I think, 3 payments to the town of North Elba for various services. So that's what they call it, a warrant.
So it's like a batch of accounts payable.
Yes. Yep. So we have a claims auditor comes in and she reviews everything prior to us actually producing the checks. Basically what is needed is we need a purchase order, an invoice. We need to show that the item has actually been received, and all of that documentation comes together. And once we have all of that together, Lori then says, "Yep, it's good to pay them." And then we have an independent claims auditor, and that's what you see on the quarterly reports. You'll see those typically in the information for the board. It's the claims audit reports, and basically it shows the different times that Andrea Berry is her name comes in, and she reviews all of our purchase orders prior to us cutting the checks.
And what is tax certiorari, please?
The tax, so that is our reserve account. So if we had to, basically, if someone gets a refund on their taxes, a taxery. So this is what we would draw from. It's one of our reserve accounts. I think last board meeting, you approved some AV reductions is what they're called. And we had to refund some taxpayers. Generally speaking, they're very small dollar amounts, but we have a reserve account just in case. Number of years ago, the district was hit with an AV reduction from, I think it was Whiteface Lodge or something like that. It was about $1 million. So we ended up, the district ended up taking out a bond to pay for that. And I think that it just is coming off the books.
Thank you, Dana. I appreciate your answers.
Yep.
Any other questions for Dana? If not, strategic plan, you have 3 proposals from consulting services in board docs. There was a meeting last week between district representatives and PLC associates. That information is in the write-up. I apologize for not being able to attend, but Tim, do you have any additional information? I'm sure.
Well, first, I want to thank Dana for coordinating the receipt of the proposals to date, and Martha for assisting in that effort as well. Certainly, PLC in their presentation to Dana, Tammy, and I, they highlighted a process that ultimately can go as quickly or as slowly as the district wishes it to. We had some good dialogue initially about, is just confirming, is the time right for this? Given the COVID malaise and the myriad challenges that are present right now. And the more that we talked about what the process could be, I think the more that we all felt that the timing really was opportune, and that having a plan that potentially could culminate at the start of the summer to reframe our focus as a district, not just for the next several years, but to kick off the school year in September, really would be a pretty fortuitous shift in terms of harnessing some of the energy that has laid dormant in the wake of the pandemic over the past several weeks. So I think ultimately PLC is amenable to whatever timeline we wish, but we did discuss if the board was amenable to starting this process sooner rather than later, having the core leadership team assemble in January and February, and then preparing for the forward-facing aspects of this process to take place in March, where we would bring several groups of shareholders in over the course of a few meetings taking place over several weeks, and they would just sort of facilitate the process from there. But I was one of 3 attendees representing the district at the time. Dana, I'm curious what your thoughts are, having followed this process since its inception as well. So anything to add regarding our meeting with PLC and the process generally?
No, I think Martha finding some other organizations to get bids on. And I think PLC is the one that I believe Martha reached out as well. I think you reached out, I reached out to them. They kind of responded to both of us. And one of the things I got from them is not only were they the lowest bid, I believe they have the most experience working with public schools. And it's really, I think that's where their focus is in public schools. I said it earlier in the previous meeting, they are currently working with Tupper Lake, but that's just a local school. They've done some work with Malone, with leadership things. I know they're working with Saranac Lake with curriculum. So they really have their hands in a number of facets within school systems. So I think they're a really good fit because they are very knowledgeable about public schools.
Right. Thank you. Anything else? Martha, do you have any input? Thank you for your attention to this. Originally I thought maybe we should look into getting this process delaying a little bit until the new, a couple of new board members came on. But in thinking about that, I don't think they would, depending upon who the board members are, would they have that much input? They're not familiar with the goings on. So, and the board is just a supporting element for the district, mainly the building administrators and Tim and Dana. So I think this timeline, well, it's not a timeline, but the conclusion in late June or July would look good. So anybody else have any comments on the process or?
I can just agree that as the newest board member, I would not have had much input in the first month because you're still trying to figure out how to show up to the meeting on time. So
Of which you
I
were
would-
very successful at, by the way.
well, little baby steps. So yeah, I wouldn't hold up on new board members because if you're going to wait for us new board members to get up to speed, you're going to be waiting years.
Okay. Thank you.
I think that the board has to vote on accepting this, and they have to choose which option they want to go with, A, B, or C.
As far as the which company, so to speak, or
No, but like if you notice within PLC, they gave you three choices. C.
for some reason I'm not able to open up these attachments. I don't know what's going on.
And Dana, it looks like a 40% of this is coming from aid. Is that New York State aid?
Well, yes. So we can run it through BOCES or NARIC, and because we're running it through BOCES, it's considered aidable. So it's a shared service.
Okay.
So, yeah,
We get that 3 cents on a dollar.
correct.
Yeah.
But one of the things when we talked about them, I think option A probably it made the most sense because it gave the most in-person contacts. I think it was like up to 14 visits and things like that that they will do. So I thought that was probably, if you look at it in terms of having the contact time and then being on site, option A was probably the best.
So what would be the cost to the district for option A? Because that's the most expensive one, right?
Yeah, I think it says approximately $26,000 after aid. And again, that's approximate because until you BOCES aid and all that, but that's the approximate cost. What's nice thing about it is they even said through this whole process, one of the things they do is they do all the technical writing of the plan itself. They generate, we as a community generate the ideas, and from that they wordsmith everything, and they come up with the documents, and then they will put together any type of media material we want to distribute, brochures or things like that. So they will do all of that for us as well. They've even produced videos for districts to share in terms of the process. So they, as they explained it they cover A to Z in terms of it and every aspect of it. So a very comprehensive plan.
Is that something that we should move on this evening?
If the board-
To let the other folks off the hook, yes.
Can we set a dollar amount, and allow do we need to pick the specific one, or can we just approve, yes, we approve up to this 26,997 number, and then allow the admin team to kind of figure out which one of those three options is best?
I would recommend picking the option as opposed to picking the price.
Okay. Okay. Karen, would you like to wait till we get to the other items, or can we make a motion now and move forward with it?
Why don't we wait, and then I'll try to come up with some wording. How's
Okay.
that? Are you gonna
Perfect.
A then?
I'm
Is that
sorry.
A, option A.
That's what it sounds like. That's what the recommendation is. It's, as long as everybody is comfortable with that, I am. So just to be straight and looking at this, the cost for option A, is it correct in saying it's basically 27,000? Is that?
After aid, yes. The upfront,
Yes.
front's about 45.
Right. Okay. Okay.
I guess my only reservation on the timing of this is, will we be able, if we can make the community schools work, money, financial wise, are we gonna be able to use them to help us design that model? Or incorporate that in strategic plans?
What a great point.
Wondering whether, if we're gonna invest, whether the community schools model will be incorporated into the strategic plan, should we approve it? So that's my timing. I knew there was something there. There's a connection there, whether, okay, what if we go and we find the money and we get,
The director of community schools and a coalition.
yeah, but then we've just spent whatever, 30 grand, which is well spent. I think we should absolutely do it, but we've not incorporated this huge piece to the strategic plan.
I think the way PLC described it, Liam, and I agree with you, that would be a fundamental misstep if we don't do that. So, but they said that initially they would come and spend some on-site time with myself, with Dana, talking about the administrative vision that we see, what's coming down the pike, what we want to cultivate, and then they incorporate a process that tries to inform those key items. So I guess what I'm saying is, if we start the forward-facing aspects of this with community shareholders in March, certainly it would be fantastic if we could be in a position where community schools, we felt like, had the momentum at that time to incorporate, to have a solid direction with that. But if we don't, I think we can gear up to that, acknowledging that we're working towards this process, that this is the way we're initially envisioning it. Maybe it can support the vision. The alternative is we wait, and
Well, I just think it might be awkward for the board, like, it may be like the new board member coming in and having no idea what he's voting on. Because it kind of has to be ready. The real due date is the beginning of next school year, which I know the summer is cutting it close to July 1st, but.
are you talking about the adoption of a potential strategic plan, or the adoption of?
The strategic plan.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm talking about back to timing on the strategic plan. And
Can't the, oops, sorry, Liam, go ahead.
Okay. I'm just saying that this is back to Rick. He stirred the pot with the raising the timing issue. And so I knew in my brain, it was like something wasn't, and so that's my concern, is that we may have to do, the timing may have to go when the timing,
Might be too many pots on the stove.
yes.
But can't the strategic plan, because the strategic plan is basically goals, objectives, and the community schools could be formatted in a way that it could still be one of the goals or objectives within the strategic plan for the community schools.
Okay. Okay. I mean,
yeah.
you're fine with it, Rick. I'll demur to your judgment on it.
Okay.
Just give me lots of demurring.
Any other conversation? Great. Let's see, superintendent report.
So I'll start. There's a few items to cover this evening. I'll start with athletics, just because there's such a robust presence around the district this evening, in the parking lots. So the first, under hockey, the first game being played in Placid this year is taking place as we speak in the newly refurbished 32 rink versus Plattsburgh. On the girls' side, regular season ends next week, and the 80 rink will host the sectional girls' final on February 3rd. In Nordic skiing, weather and cold have had a fairly significant impact on some of our races this year. We did have to cancel our invitational that was scheduled for January 17th, as a number of schools were coming from far away to attend, and the storm made that event unsafe, unfortunately. So the next race will be at Mount Van Ho on Thursday of this week. On the basketball court, boys basketball team has been shorthanded regrettably for parts of the year due to injuries and pandemic. A number of games have been rescheduled, but so far it looks as though we will be able to complete the season. Girls basketball has had less COVID isolation than quarantines, but the majority of the girls have been able to play all year, which is excellent. The basketball regular season will wrap up by February 18th. The 79th annual Lake Placid High School Winter Carnival will take place on Thursday, March 17th. This year's theme for the Winter Carnival is circus. This carnival will take place in March with the hope that there will be greater ability to provide a more traditional experience for students. And Winter Carnival activities may need to be modified to accommodate the pandemic as the situation progresses. The Winter Carnival hockey tournament will take place quite a bit earlier than the actual carnival itself in March. Tournament will take place on Thursday, February 3rd, and Friday, February 4th, and Saturday, February 5th, with games against Franklin Academy, Rye, NCCS, Aquinas Institute, and those are the main competitors that SLP will be competing against. On the community school front, you'll see in the information for the board that I did include a brief update on some of the progress that has taken place to date on that initiative. But certainly we've had several meetings with regional partners, and everyone that we've met with thus far has been very supportive. We feel like things are progressing in a positive direction. There are several funding streams that may be of import that are application based and are due on February 1st. So I will be working diligently to ensure that our submissions of all those opportunities are met by the 1st. The last 2 weeks have been very busy also in the public health world. The guidance surrounding COVID-19 continues to change. Schools are now no longer contact tracing in New York State, so that a greater focus can be placed on testing students and keeping potential contacts out of unnecessary quarantines in the classroom. Given the lack of transmission that we've seen in our facilities, this change in procedure is understandable and certainly will allow schools to focus on their core mission of educating students. Speaking of educating students and protecting the safety of students, we continue to receive shipments of COVID tests each week from the governor's office for students and staff to utilize, and we anticipate the supply of tests continuing for the remainder of the year. As such, we will be providing tests to families frequently as a result of this positive development. Something that might be a bit of a blind spot compared to all of the other events happening across the state in education has to do with the actual learning standards when it comes to education. Something that as a district we are paying attention to and will continue to. We are just starting to oversee the transition from the Common Core standards are currently going to be lapsing in both math and ELA and transitioning to the next generation learning standards. So I'm going to just share my screen for a second so I can give the board a sense of what some of these changes actually are. We want to do this. Thanks for your patience. Okay, hopefully, can everyone see that all right? Okay, so this is a very elaborate chart that shows the myriad changes taking place over the next 7 years. I can back out of that. There we go. For the next 7 years in all of the major content areas and all of the initiatives in New York State. So the first I'll just draw your attention to is, as you can see, in the spring of this year, we're going to see the last administration of the 3 through 8 ELA test. And starting in the fall of next year, we're going to see the full implementation of the ELA standards K through 8. So this represents a transition that will culminate next year with the administration of the new Next Generation Learning Standards ELA test. There's a similar process that is mirrored when it comes to math. So the Next Generation Learning Standards really are a replacement of the Common Core that have been in place for a number of years. Both of these, there are some recognizable shifts in both the expectations of students and staff that we need to prepare for as a district. So just to highlight some of those, I'll give you a little bit of background. So since 2017, New York has been in the process of shifting away from the Common Core, opting instead to revise its standards for math and ELA and move towards a new set of guidelines called the Next Generation Learning Standards. These changes are both minor and major. It sounds more like a math class or a music class. Math and ELA updates range from simple wording changes to entirely eliminating or redefining some standards. For example, under Common Core, they separated reading for information and reading for literature into two different categories. The Next Generation Learning Standards recognizes that actually these can be combined as people are known to read for information and read for literature. In math, certain trigonometry standards have been shifted away from geometry and placed in Algebra 2. And probability and statistics standards for middle school students have moved from one grade to another. Some standards that students experienced in multiple grades were excised from one. And when it comes to our younger students, early childhood education has been given a renewed emphasis on play and curiosity rather than rote learning. The new standards also underscore the need for developmentally appropriate curriculum and flexibility for students who aren't ready to tackle certain standards. There's a lot of changes here. So in preparation for these changes, the district is looking at ways to utilize department leaders in unique ways to prepare for the shift in content. This is also prompting us to look at ways to unify the middle school and elementary school so that instructional teams can work together at designated times that are consistent. There are many considerations involved in these discussions, but it is our hope to present some possible scenarios for the board and how we can achieve these goals over the next few months. So just showing you this chart here to give you a further idea of all the different changes coming down the pike. So we really need to be focused in the next year and a half on ELA and math, as that's the first phase shift. But when we go down to science, we're going to see the 4th grade science test, which in many cases has been the most predictable test for teachers and students to prepare for in its consistency. That is being shuttered. And by 2023, going to see a shift in testing where students will take a new 8th grade science test, and there will be no elementary tests at the 4th grade level. So substantial changes. Even this year in social studies, there is the first Regents exam administration in June of a new framework for history and government, one that has an emphasis on critical thinking skills, more than just traditional usage of documents and document-based questions, DBQs, for people who are familiar with those, more having persuasive content and thematic essays than a reliance on documentation. There's also civic readiness that is being pushed across the state that districts need to prepare for. And then culturally responsive and sustainable education frameworks. And this fits in nicely with the district's moves towards full incorporation of its DEI policy. Essentially, the hope across the state was that implementation of DEI policies would take place by the fall of this year. Thankfully, the district is already in a very favorable position with regards to that. So lots of shifts in content that are taking place over the next several years that we are keeping track of. And I see the summer and as a time to kind of prepare our staff for understanding those changes. But ultimately, coming from the classroom, I can say it's really time that staff are going to need and direction as to what these changes are, but time throughout the school year that we're going to try and create through instructional team time, grade level teams, and just have recurring conversation so that we're moving along with the crosswalks that are intended by the state. Any questions related to?
Tim, can we get a copy of this, or will this be available for us to look further later online, or?
Absolutely. I will make sure that you all have a copy of that. It's helpful. And when on those boxes that are content specific, what's nice, and I can just briefly show you this as well, but I'll make sure that you all have it.
Great, thanks.
Absolutely. So over the past several years, State Ed has been putting out what's called crosswalk documents to highlight the differences between the Common Core standards and the next generation learning standards. So this gives you, as you click on each one of these content areas, it gives you the timeline that shows how they've intended to implement this. And you'll know there's an arrow up here, which is really what the district should be doing: ongoing curriculum and professional development. So over the next year, you are probably going to see an increase in professional development costs across the district. You may also see additional requests for new curriculum to be embedded in the classroom that supports the shift in standards and no longer relies upon standards that have lapsed. So when we look at where we're supposed to be 2021, 2022, we're gearing up for this long process that ultimately by 2027, we're going to see the last administration of the ELA regents that is based in the Common Core and really a greater shift towards learning standards under the next generation that will be tested thereafter. So these are all staggered across. They are very helpful information, but it's going to be a fair amount of preparation to ensure that our staff are prepared for these shifts.
That was going to be my next question was, do we need to anticipate this in the coming budget discussions of maybe increasing or creating a, if not increasing that budget for staff development, or maybe creating some sort of fund to catch any overages just to anticipate?
I think that would be prudent consideration, given what we're faced with in the shift in standards, and also trying to reframe the roles that our department heads play presently. That they're really galvanizing the teams, the different departments in a way that the administrators just are unable to do due to the myriad challenges, and so. Finding ways to reframe the work that they're doing to provide professional development for our department leaders, and then to turnkey that to their respective department members throughout the school year, incentivizing the role of the department leader through additional compensation. Presently, they're not compensated for that role. These are all things that would be wise for the district to consider over the next, certainly 6 months, but into the next year.
Any other questions?
It's exciting and complicated.
It's nice to get back to talking about instruction and less about everything else.
That's what we're here for, right? Tim, you're all set with the report?
I am. Thank you much.
Great, thank you. Information for the board. There's a NISBA webinar information. And then there are 3 additional documents that hopefully you had the opportunity to look at. Any comments on any of these 4 items under information for the board? Great. If there are none, linking goals to the agenda items.
Superintendents report under community outreach and involvement. Also his information under information for the board. And also, strategic goal number 3, the strategic plan that we're going to vote on here later.
Mhm. Good. I have goal number 1 with bullet 1, which is the COVID, would be superintendent's report, and also 6G, which is the substitute pay increase. And goal 6 for the budget work session. Excuse me. Anyone else have any?
I don't have an addition, but I have a question regarding the superintendent's report that went out of my head and has returned to my head. Which
Okay.
is, if I may,
Please.
is Chipman Youth Center of a level of influence that it would be included in that grid of contacts that you made, Tim?
Yes. So initially what we're looking at is one network to draw upon to highlight different events and offerings that are coming into the community that we could create. And then one network of different existing associations in the community that we can draw upon to enhance those offerings. And initially I'm seeing Shipman as a little bit of both, but probably more in the latter of enhancing some of the opportunities that are there. So they certainly are going to be an integral part of that process.
Thank you. Initial budget work session.
That me? All right.
Sure.
Hopefully you looked at the documents that I provided. As a little overview as to where we are. I broke it down in terms of things we know and things we don't know. At the very top is basically we know that's the cap will be 2%. You'll see that over the past year, the Cpiu was 4.7%. And because it was over 2% per state law, we have to cap it at 2. So that's what we're going off of, 2%. There's obviously exclusions and things like that. So even though it's a cap of 2%, it could be less, it could be more, depending on all of our exclusions. And I'll get to that as we move down this list as to why, if you looked ahead, ours is actually less than 2% at this moment in time because of debt service. LPA contracts, looking at it based off of their contracts, it's 2%. So their salary increases is based off of the Cpiu, which is capped at 2%, plus step. So the average teachers increase for this next year is 3.8%. And that ranges from low 3s to mid 4s, depending on what step that teacher's on. They have, I think, 19 steps, and depending on where they fall on their salary step, determines really what their raise is. And that salary schedule is actually was put together in the past by the teachers union themselves. So that's kind of how it factors out. The average TA increase is 3.42% and kind of follows along the same lines, depending on where the teaching assistant falls on the step schedule, really dictates what their percentage increase is. CSEA increases, that's 3.25%. That is as in the contract. So that's all CSEA employees get the 3.25%. Administration, and my apologies, GMT is meant to be management confidential. So I do apologize for that, what GMT is, but it's management confidential. That is 3.5% as well. And that is how that is factored is it's tied to the Cpiu as well. So it's the Cpiu, which is 2%. Well, actually, it was 4.7% plus 1, but in the contracts, there's a ceiling of no lower than, I believe, 2% and no higher than 3.5%. So that's why it's capped at 3.5%. Then some of the things they talked earlier, creating a community schools contractual materials account. So I did factor in basing it off of Saranac Lake's model. They have a contractual budget of about $10,000 and a materials budget of $25,000. That's right in their appropriations accounts and their budgeting, but they actually say their expenses are much higher than that. But where the other expenses fall in is through the grants. And Tim had talked about going after a number of these grants. Eric Bazile and Saranac Lake had mentioned that in the end, they probably have about over $100,000 tied up in that, but a good portion of that is grant base. But they do build in within their budgets $35,000. So I did put that in there as a starting point for right now, because that's kind of the direction it sounds like we're heading. So that's kind of when you talk about some of the things. Other than that, everything materials and supplies have stayed steady. They have not really been increased, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as to why. And because when you look at it, our tax cap calculation as it stands right now is actually a negative 0.2283%. So last year we held everything. We didn't increase anything. We kept it right at the same. So we didn't have a tax levy increase, and we kept our available revenue through property taxes at $16.7 million. Based off of what we are anticipating in terms of our debt service next year, that's the exclusion portion of it. We're actually going to see a decrease as it stands right now, a decrease in our tax levy. So rather than generating $16.7 million, if we wanted to keep it zero, it's actually going to be right now $16.671,859. So a decrease of about $38,000 in our tax levy. And the reason is we have a bond coming off. I had mentioned earlier in the meeting that we're kind of finishing up one bond. So about $150,000 of annual debts is coming off the books this year. Coupled with the fact that our bonds for the capital project is going to be a little less than what we had anticipated. The last 2 years, I've been budgeting about $1.5 million to go towards our new bonds based off of paying, off the band and stuff like that. As it stands right now, we have, and this kind of goes into the cash sweep, we have about $2.7 million still left in the capital project as revenue. So if we were returning that revenue towards the bond, actually our bond going forward will be about $13 million, just under $14 million is what we're going to be bonding out for the next 12 plus years. So I did ask fiscal advisor to do up a bond payment schedule, and that comes in about $1.2 million as opposed to what we've been budgeting, about $1.5 million. So just like that, we got to take off about $300,000 that we have been able to exclude the last couple of years. So that's kind of where we are right now. The good thing is, one thing you look at it is we're going to be paying less over the next 12 years in debt service. So this is sort of like a 1-year blip. We're kind of correcting it right now because we didn't spend as much on the capital project. So if you look long-term, we're going to be spending about $1 million a year on our new debts, our new bonds over the next 12, 13 years. So the reason it's that lower is we've been paying on it as we've been going through the process anyway. So that's why we're not bonding $19.1 million. We've paid, we're going to be paying $1.5 million this year. We paid about $1.5 million last year. We have about a little over $2 million that we can give back. So that's kind of why we are. So long term, it's really good fiscally, but in terms of the short term, we're going to see a blip. But that's as it stands right now. The numbers aren't final. We are in the process of finalizing the capital project. All of our documents are in. Elmer Davis has finally submitted all of their documents. So we're actually in the process of closing out the capital project. I've submitted to state ed the certificates of substantial completion. Fiscal advisors is working on our expense report that we got to submit to the state, but we still have some expenses coming in. We just had one that finishes out about $137,000 that we're going to be paying out to one of our contractors. So there's going to be some tweaks between now and I guess by the time you guys approve the budget. So that $38,000 difference actually will probably come down, and we might end up being closer to where we are right now in terms of the tax levy because of some of these final expenses. But that's kind of where we are in terms of it. We're going to be paying less debt over the next 12 to 13 years. So I put down that projecting out. So I looked at current numbers and I said, okay, what would that look like next year, a year from now in terms of budgeting? And we would actually have a tax levy increase of about 2.2%, about $380,000 in additional revenue that we can do in a year's time. So this is, again, a 1-year correction when it comes to the tax levy. As a taxpayer, I would say, hey, this is great, where my taxes might go down because the tax levy might be a little lower, but it's going to be a nominal change. It's definitely we're not going to see an increase. It's going to stay flat or a slight decrease in it. But on the other side, it looks good because we're paying less debt over this project. So our budget will be reflective of this. A couple of the other things that we do know, ERS, so that's the CSCA retirement. So that's going to stay steady at 16.2%. That was the same as what it was last year. The TRS retirement rate, they haven't come up with the final number, but it's then that 10 to 10.5%. So we should be seeing a final number, but it'll fall in there. So we're going to see a slight increase in the TRS retirements percentage. So those are kind of the things that we know as it stands right now. But I take that back because if you've been following, Governor Hochul talked about the New York State's budget this year and what has just come out. In fact, while we were at this meeting, I pulled it up. She's actually released the governor's executive proposal for the budget. It's usually the first run. It's not the final run. But in historically speaking, this is sort of like the starting point. Rarely do we see it go lower than what the governor throws out there, because once the Assembly and the Senate have their say, they usually come in somewhere slightly higher. But the run itself, we're actually looking at about a 4% increase overall, is what she has proposed. So if you listen to her speech today, she did talk about something like a $2.1 billion increase in state aid, which is the highest it's ever been. Just to kind of give you a quick overview, we're looking at about a $57,000 increase in foundation aid, which represent about a 3% increase. And we're seeing a slight increase in some of the other things like BOCES aid is really where the largest increase is. So in the end, it looks like about $147,000 increase according to her proposal, which indicates a 4.31% increase. Like I said, that just came out about 20 minutes ago. So I did have it under things we don't know. It's things we do know now. So tomorrow I will be looking at those numbers and plugging them in my budget spreadsheet to start playing with the revenue side of our budget, so that I think our next the meeting in February, the second budget meeting, will really be rolling out our first draft of it, where you guys are seeing some hard numbers. By then, we should have some of the things that we don't know, like our insurance rate increase. The Health Consortium is meeting early February, and that's typically where we'll set our rates. Right now, I'm budgeting about a 3.5% increase. Last year, I think it was 2%. The year before that, it was 1%. But just looking at the costs and things like that, I could see it more in the 3 to 4% increase as our rates. BOCES rate, we're estimating about a 3. Right now I have about a 3%, a little over 3% increase in the cost of BOCES. We won't know that until into March is when we will see their budget and stuff like that. But this is what I'm right now estimating. And the last thing there that I'm estimating is the use of the fund balance. I'm currently estimating $600,000 in terms of the use of the fund balance. Right now, we have in this current budget $482,000 that we have budgeted for from the fund balance. But looking at the numbers as it stood before the governor's run, just by looking at all of these things, factoring in the increases and things like that, I had a difference of about $290,000 between what our revenue it was based off of and what our current expenses as we know it today. There is that difference there. That's
Dana?
sort of, yes.
Sorry, Dana. Last year, and maybe I'm quoting this wrong, but did we have a flat insurance increase last year? I remember it was some remarkable thing that we didn't have an increase in the Health Consortium last year or something. Am I remembering that wrong?
It was, I think, 2%.
Okay.
Yeah. What we did was, I know we got some money back, and we got, in essence, we got a refund from the previous year. So we ended up expensing that out to the staff. I forget what the actual dollar amount was. It's about $150,000, but the actual premium payments, I think, pretty sure, I think it was like a 2% increase.
Yeah, it was pretty remarkable regardless,
Yeah.
2%. So I just remember it was something that was interesting. Thanks.
The trends outside our Health Consortium, the trend has been about 6 to 7%. So over the last 3 to 5 years, we've actually been below the trends. We've been in that 1 to 3% increase. So our Health Consortium is doing very well. They've done a nice job of watching the expenses.
Great. Thank you.
Hey, Dana, question
Yeah.
for you. It's not a huge amount, but are we still on the hiatus for the BOCES capital? Where we input money into the towards the capital, not the current capital campaign, but they put us on hiatus for 3 years, I think.
Yeah, we had a nominal charge this year for capital. It was a couple $1,000s, but yeah, we're not going to see that. That figure. You're right in that.
Okay, I didn't know when that ended, but probably next year we'll see it back again.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions, comments, explanations?
Martha?
Thank you. I am so pleased to see that we're giving CSEA the raise that they asked for. And I was wondering if that was just cost of living or something greater or less.
That is based off of the contract that was approved 2 years ago. So that is in their contract. Both the LPA and the CSEA contract comes up in 2023. CSEA had a 3.5% increase each of the 3 years of the current contracts.
But 3.2.
3.25%, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Go ahead.
so that is their contractual increase per what was negotiated 2 years ago.
So what in addition to yay, they're getting what they asked for, admin and management confidential are getting a little bit more, and I wonder if that raises any issues.
No, because it's all based off of what each bargaining units agrees to. So the LPA, when they negotiated their contracts 2 years ago, they agreed to, and the district, the district and LPA agreed to a salary schedule of the Cpiu. So whatever the state says the Cpiu is, in this case, this year, it's 2% plus their step. And their step is basically years of service. Generally speaking, if they have no years of teaching, they come in at step 1 and they work their way through to, off step is basically step 20. So every year they get a increase. They go from step 1 to step 2. So their salary schedule is based off of their increases. Not only do they get the step increase that's built in, they also get, in this case, this coming year, a 2% increase. So that's why the average increase is 3.8% this year. Last year, the average increase was 3.06%. So it changes each year depending on what the Cpiu is.
If a little historical perspective for those that don't know, the management confidential and the administrative staff have been on the Cpiu plus or minus a percentage for quite a while to set a precedent, because for about 6 years or 2 negotiation phases, we were trying to get both unions to go with the Cpiu because that's more reflective of how we budget. The Teachers Association finally went in that direction. So I'm smiling a bit that they're getting the Cpiu is up because they took the gamble and it paid off. So I think that's great.
And Martha, just to kind of show you from year to year, last year, the administrators and the management confidential, their increase was 2.23%, whereas CSEA was 3.25%, and the LPA was a little over 3%. So,
Got it.
right. So it's all based off of what is negotiated with that units. The administrators and the management confidential isn't a bargaining unit, but they basically have the same contract language.
Okay. I have 2 more questions. You mentioned that we would be talking about costs related to supply chain issues. That's my language, supply chain, but just general costs. You said we'd be talking about it later, and they had not gone up, but it seems like all over the place there's inflation, and I was just wondering about that.
Well, we haven't. What I mean by they haven't gone up is haven't increased our budget lines for supplies and materials. They're staying flat. And the reason for that is, well, we're sitting at a negative budget right now. There's certain things that we have no control over. We don't have control. We don't have control over the contractual increases, LPA, management confidential. We have say when we negotiate the contracts, but once those contracts are signed, those are what they are. We can't change those. We have a say with the health insurance premium rates, but we're one of 10 districts that vote on it. And in the end, it's the consortium, the health consortium that approves it. And again, that's what it is. BOCES is the same thing. BOCES rate is based off of the service. The more we use with BOCES, yes, it's aidable, but also the more they charge, particularly when it comes to when we send students to BOCES. If you remember, over the last 2 years, we've seen a double-digit increase in the costs to send students, the occupational side, to BOCES. We had like a 17% increase last year in the cost, and the year before that, I think it was like a 15% increase. Administrative costs over the last 2 years have stayed relatively flat, 1% to 2%, but the real increase has been, I call it on the student side, the number of students that we send. So students that go to the Ed Center for the vocational programs or new vision programs. That's really where the biggest increase has been over the last couple of years. And that's all enrollment driven. The more you send, the more we pay. We've seen a decline over the last couple of years in terms of number of students going, but the rate is based off of a 5-year trends. So it doesn't change. It changes, but it's on a 5-year. It's kind of looking at it in a 5-year period. So what we are seeing in increases now isn't necessarily reflective of our actual numbers this year, because they factor in 4 other years. So it's a kind of a looking at the enrollment trend over the past 5 years. We'll see that change because we have had a decrease in the number of students going to the Ed Center. And that's obviously, you look at our enrollment is not increasing. Our enrollment is decreasing slightly every year. It ebbs and flows as to how many students want to go to the Ed Center, because they might not be interested in any of the programs that they offer, and they want to stay in the school all day. So that changes, but the rates are based off of a 5-year rates enrollment wise, not a every year rate. So when I say that materials and supplies, those are the one area that we have the most control over, and we've actually kept them pretty flat over the last 5 years. So I'll bring back a phrase that has been used in the past. So even though it's a flat increase, you're right, Martha, because of the cost of everything going up, it's actually a decrease because people are unable to purchase as much for the same amount. So that teacher that has a $600 budgets for materials and supplies isn't going to get the same amount of goods this year as they did 3 years ago. So the rate is the same, but the purchasing power has decreased. So you're right there. It's actually, without changing the number, we're actually seeing a decrease in what we can purchase.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, there was the roof leak that poured into the library. Are there any residual costs associated with that?
No, that was all kind of run under the capital project. So I think in the end, all of the leaks through there between the auditorium, the west wing above the music wing, and the library ended up being about $312,000 to $313,000 in damages. We did submit 3 insurance claims, and I believe we ended up getting back about $230,000, $240,000 from Utica National on that. The rest of it was covered under the capital projects. So there was nothing that came out of our general appropriation accounts.
Thank you, Dana.
Yep.
Any other questions for Dana? Look forward to this process. Seems to get, I wouldn't say easier every year, but it's a better grasp on it. So if there's nothing further, thank you very much. Great explanations and a lot of work. So thank you, Dana. Moving on, minutes, that's under consent. Personnel items, recommended action is the consent agenda. Approve the following items, which are included in the personnel consent agenda. 6B, the long-term teaching assistant appointment. 6C, teaching staff retirement. 6D, teaching assistant unpaid leave request. 6E, resignation of international student coordinator. 6F, teaching staff resignation. And 6G, substitute pay increase for COVID-19. May I have a motion to accept this consent agenda?
Hey, Rick.
Yes.
6H back in. I added it, but I didn't add it to the actual motion. I'm just going to add it in now.
Okay, so 6H, the mentor appointment.
Yep.
Okay, with that said, may I have a motion to accept this consent agenda?
Yes.
Dan Marvin, Colleen.
Yes. Okay, if you'd please vote.
I just wanted to make a comment about F, the teaching staff resignation.
Sure.
Is it Chris Laundry?
Yes.
Is it housing? Basically, it's housing is the reason why because he's got, he's saying that it's the commute.
I think if there was affordable housing, it would be an inducement perhaps. His roots are there, his wife works at Plattsburgh State, so. I
I
think
just
there's a-
picked up down that little line. I did a double take. I was wondering whether we were losing a teacher to a housing, or was it a push-pull factors and there was pull factors as well?
I think the commute is a big deal. And,
Yeah, 2 hours.
Yeah, I think that was the big
Yeah.
piece
Mm,
for us.
That's really unfortunate.
Yeah, he's
Yes,
lovely.
sorry.
Let's just say the housing situation isn't helping.
Yes.
Also would like to recognize Dr. Miller for his years of service to the district.
Agree, thank you.
Well said. That'll be an interesting hire, Tim.
Yes. May need a psychologist for that process. If you know anyone.
Are the votes in, Karen?
Yes, 7 yes.
Okay, 7 yes, 0 opposed. The consent agenda passes. Other action items, all of these were under the consent, except for the newly added appointment of PLC for the facilitation of strategic plan. So the recommended action reads, whereas Lake Placid Central School Board of Education wishes to update the district's strategic plan, whereas the district obtained quotes from 3 companies to facilitate the updated plan. Now, therefore, the Board of Education of the Lake Placid Central School wishes to appoint PLC Associates, Inc. to facilitate a new strategic plan. So be it resolved, the Lake Placid Central School Board of Education appoints PLC Associates, Inc., choosing option A for the facilitation of a new strategic plan. May I have a motion to accept this recommendation? Joan? Made the
Second.
motion, seconded by Daniel. Any discussion?
Well worded, Karen.
Yes. Way to go under pressure.
Under pressure.
It's where you do your best work, right, Karen?
Right. Seven yes.
Okay, 7 yes, 0 no's. The motion passes. Any questions on the special education packet for February 8th? And if not, go into go to the cause. Anybody show up? Any emails? No? Great. Thank you. Adjournment phase, next meeting, location, dates and locations are listed. Please note that 6 p.m. is the starting time, except for the 22nd, when we have a budget session, which is 5:30 p.m. Old topic, strategic plan and succession plan. I believe we've addressed at least one of those. Not sure if there's anything on the succession planning. Any new agenda topic items? If not, we will recommended action is to a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Yes.
I didn't get who that was, Karen, but
Liam.
Liam, okay. And
Colleen had second.
Colleen second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any noes? Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a
Thanks,
good night,
guys.
everyone.
Feel better, Rick.
Thank you. We'll try.